Great, raise your second inhibitor.
Tamba, Chandende, Yoshinchi,
Teacher. The founder, the adoptions of the story, the life of the story, complete perfect perfectly knowledge and free common. The vows of your supreme future of all to use to beautiful story. Glorious conqueror. The pure of the shrinking flame. Greatly perfection for the ways of being. Perfect in knowledge and in wisdom. From God's
Sanjay Dola Jadala Jula Jula Jadala Gendry Jana Jala Zula Dadia Banjari
I prostrate me. I am with emotion like an where the best Lord to you like your spirit. With supreme incomparably wise one to you like your spirit. At the same the field of merit which Lord is to you divine God's substance. The virtue that brings life from the lower God. The one path is the blind reality, to the God that pacifies our strength. Those who are liberated and also showing the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realization, who are devoted to the moral freedom, to you, sublime community, taking virtue, our strength. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all three ever devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms, atoms in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not lead us in our sexual actions, but all under 35th actions. But do your life thoroughly, with the ceasing of the word. A star, which liberation, slanding, and then reveal the book of true or of it.
Are you there?
And now it's similarly, rhythm, suffering, origination, cessation, and power. There is no result of wisdom or attainment, and also no non-attainment. Sharakuta, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on the development of perfection of wisdom, the one who develops duration without fear. Having completely passed beyond terror, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All orders who dwell in straight times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment. The light is on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth and that is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Ayata Gani Gani, Paragani, Parasamgani, Bodhisattva. Sharakuta, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva should train without perfection of wisdom like that. And the Bhagavan wrote through that concentration, because every Bodhisattva without Jivara saying, well said, some it is like that, it is like that. One to practice the profound perfection of wisdom, even the proud. The Bhagavan becomes spoken, the venerable Sharavanaputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Jivara. Those surrounding in their entirety along the world of goals, kingdoms, and thrones and now, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Lord. Verse 25, should we read on?
Kala kimse chichen
Yada dambe de jensima. Ye chuji chava.
chichen mamba chanchong hadal ani chimse chi agi chi chipe samon chi chola pinche Adon sachi chanmama chanchong badu dani Ange roha Argi chichen samon chi
Ganga de Zenya, the Lord and Japan, the nation, the Ponam, Chatham. When you just and the Japan, she get the Japan, China, the though the version and Raja, but there's a number of watching and that it will be of the Jute. But then Jamaican ages one year goes on to Jim, don't tell them so. No, I don't know. Gulung from this Jagosra. Gulung from the Tananga Chunia. 그래서 지구에 되는 로야시도 많이 바로 라라 세대라 그린 진지다 파마니라 속에 심지 미다 준돌라 속에 망보시지 여러와 되절이야 아니에 네 편바트야 치되네 최대 년바다 삼마 공부치기 삼비 되는데 네 군론 신비 전주 심지 군론 야고지 제쇼스라
Assuming the correct intention, one will listen to this class not just for one's own purpose, but for that of the kindness of the parents of this life, who are living beings to which in number are vast, those of humans and animals. So to benefit them, one will hear, reflect, and meditate on this Dharma with a mind conjoined with the beneficial intention of bodhicitta.
아야다 가와 검라 말하는 드링 딘데기 추지 니 총마디 그거 비하고인 진심면에 가와 공부를 했어.
Rejoicing that today we have the fortune to listen to that holy Dharma, rejoicing in that opportunity.
아야다 하나만서 다디 주시려고 돼 산제 있고 농부께 세고라. 한데라 남바 산제에 추역이 좀 시더지. 수식 시나야 고여라. 좀 시들라 시람 되고세 대전 숨나라 되저와. 시 되도 단단하는도다 시를 요배하게는 뭐 내주 뭐 내다 간대지 메시야 들어와. 싱고베 내주스데 싱고베 내주데라는 거서 뒤제도 정말 미다고라시레스 교가도도 서와. 자도도 뭐에 내주레데로와. 아니 딜레야 버지 바 타도도데 아니 뒤제 미다고세야로 뭐 다음에 와세야로 된다고 동반이 세야로 다 뒤제딜라 아니 뭐버딜라 교가도에 교마도와 교가도냐라이나야 고 타라만 뭐지 속단 셔바스야 데제니 시오야로 된데다 뭐이네줄라 데레 망보지 임고요레스 엔딘디 싱어웨 네주스 다 싱어웨 네즈데라 네 데마니그나나 두도야 군조 데마다 나 데바스와 군조 데바스야데 네 낭주다 네주 미트윈 바로 군조 베라시 와다 군조기 지로 내가 그 뭐에 내로 두다로 시에션이 되고라 된단 봤을 라인데 뭐 내로 타도데 지금 뭐 가리나지 때내 중심 요즘에 심하된 바 중된 요지 요 말레스 대단 된중게 최 된중인 비준진지 아니 동거래시아로 된중인 비준진지 다음에 오래시아로 그래서 내줄라 레데요와 시 시ngöwe 내주고 도나진 바디 된데스진 샤베요레스와
we are looking at these qualities of Buddha's bodies. And what we really need to know is the foundation of Buddha Dharma in terms of basis, path, and result. So when we talk about the basis from which we understand Buddha Dharma, we are looking at the reality of how things exist. And we can look at that in terms of kind of functioning things. And one of the qualities of those functioning things, their reality, is that they're impermanent. And if we examine them further, not only are they impermanent, but they're in the nature of non-self, they're empty. So then there are, these phenomena that change and those that do not. Within those that change, there are like forms and consciousnesses. So we can really look at this basis, path, and result in terms of the two truths, the relative truth and ultimate truth. Basically, relative truth is how things appear temporarily. And ultimate truth, we would say that there's no phenomena that are not dependently arisen, or ultimately, no phenomena that are not in the nature of emptiness or non-self. So we would also qualify relative truth by saying that there's a disparity between the way they appear and the way they exist in their final mode. So it's important we understand Buddha Dharma in the context of this basis initially, the two truths.
다들 시딜라 템베 람 탑시니 있으러
Mm-hmm.
탑디 가래라 비디 아니 그런저 지 참바다 제와다 니중다 추림다 수와다 준주다 저리도 삼아 진바다에 라서 와도서 아디나네 조케지 쉐디 아니 삼바상보 전주기 생명년 지야 돼 단인지 첨보다 좋다도
No.
다켜와진지 시기 오래서와
No. Now, the second of those three paths, we can divide into method and wisdom. What is method? It is when we cultivate loving kindness, great compassion. We cultivate the uncontrived thought to emerge from cyclic existence. We cultivate ethics, giving. But really, what's most important amongst those is the cultivation of kind heart or great compassion, particularly great compassion with superior means.
다 chanju 셈게 먼저 직출 켈레니나 출켈 말레니나 이라 참말로 그냥 연치고 해서 먼저 메제데나야 지금 메제데 선바 상보직 전에 게마도나나 아니 미메제데 전담면 여러 차도 봐. 다 지금 선바 상보직 전에 게도이나 아니 지금 당원에 지 란레 디지드네 용거래 소소연 미래 디지드네 용거래 안 선바 지우요나 니주 고용거래 니주 군은 스불라게서 세고요 레로랑라도 갈래 가도 니굴라도
No.
아니 선바 지우요나 칼라도 신부사도 그래 칼라게 주야도 저 양고용고요래 대요나 아니 수고게 먼저 류지 내 나도 망고지 칼라게 때네 용고도 칼라라 처마도 칼라 만주와다 칼라 맞춰가다 될래드네 용고도 안데네 sempa sangbo yoweina ani jingranzo simgamge ji stress yaro anxiety yaro sim ge nushu ge ne ju sangbo mewa charo gora that's it the garang ge lube trading la cha cha ne ina ya sempa sangbo ko ya an sim ge digi la du ya la ina sempa sangbo ko ya ta choba je ngone nyone shewe ina na ani sempa sangbo che ne digi du ya de meze de jigo ma yin ba ani kyawa ne kyawa ge digi du go ya 야 라니 지고 되는 도 많이 봐네 라는 거든 제 심지 탐제기 되는 두가 삼다 다 두서 상만라 다 내가 면직스러워 내가 면직스러 면직사나 내 자탐바 저도야 누에 요 면직 이 chanju 셈래 세상 하나도다 chanju 셈네 돌아 당고 계단도 장 아니 다들 계라 배전체 다들 니마레레 팅마 숨이 싱아 투가 상노다와 상노다마세 처음으로나 냠년치도이나 다 비미시 편도 전부 여러 왔어
whether one practices Dharma or not, this notion of altruism, of bodhicitta, is very important. Because to an extent that must be practiced in the context of this life, it's important that kind heart is practiced, not just in meaning, but for our very sustenance. If we are fostered with kindness, then our life has meaning. If not, it's very difficult for us to be sustained. So your well-being depends on that kindness. And if you're brought up with that kindness, or you have that kind heart, then not only you benefit, but those around you. But also we can see that that kind heart makes the mind have a kind of well-being. So you sleep well, you rest well. You know, often we rest because we're tired, but also having a good mental attitude and kind heart affects our diet. They say diet affects health, but that's also related to mental attitude. So oftentimes we get sick because we can't digest food, but it is a mind that's upset that often relates to that lack of good health. So just by having a lack of kind-heartedness, there can be stress and there can be less potency of mind. So it works on that first level of trudin, or, you know, like your general health. But secondly, kind heart is related to your mental happiness or well-being. But more important, thirdly, is the Dharma. Here, kind heart is important not only in this life, but it continues in that continual manner to future lives. Plus, it also covers the basis of self and others. It is said that bodhicitta is the one medicine that can cure 100 ills or sicknesses. So we should look at the means to cultivate such a mind, the bodhicitta, and in the construct of a day, we should try to reflect on such a mind again and again, be it 1, 2, 3, 5, or 6 times. Not just thinking about the words, but doing our best to put into practice.
제가 아니 되네 팝지 셔럽라야지 당조 셔럽세야지 아니 가서 그랬다 먼저 미지기 지도지는 로전시엘에 셔럽 보고도 아니 제 소재와든이나 셔럽 보고도 아니 지 가서 그래 지 메도듬다 답이야든이나 셔럽 보고도 앞에 내단 자도서 가르가르 펜바이미 신담니지나 가르가르 핑거이미 가르가르 누구이미 싫으면은 아니 딘데 강에 먹고지 소용도 하고도 당하는저 미담이 바루게 니 저차야라서가 니 지가서 그래 동해 세야 먹고시오지 셔럽라디네 세고도 제가 삼보삼보 요버지고기 양 편토 말에 셔럽 보고요라 셔럽이나 지규 중요게 직텐조든지니가 처음이다 원래 준데 사로도서 셔럽되는 지고를 시고를 줄을 지고요래 직된배 시와 직된배 양도배 따와낸데리 이치배 시와 아니 거기 내가 지 아주 동해도서 정말 지 미시발되는 총아들에 셔럽이 세르고 요래 알아서 배 가서 그래 단다 강에 망고직 최대야 돼 란진지당 뇌원내루라 몸배 온기 미시바 온기 총대래 배차샤는 알아서 되게 수수 마가세 미디 아니 겨왕아마든데 수수기 자와대사 직 아마도 파우로 부로 가로로 도보로 도무로 기겐도 인데지 임바디 셔럽이도 신스나나 미들라 콘드서 유파샤제 미디 토인데 뺐다 하나게 저와의 미지 투시아서 이제 생각 가와지 고야 돼 셜록 되는 용거래 하나 말한서 셈디 베디 가서래 나군로 체대디 실험에 김진지 아니 단다 마리볼라 문베 민다디 베템버레도 알와 문버스니디 팁제 문베나랑 맞아 나군나라 잘라 가린 통구면도 와
Mhm.
아니 시럽 신이데 드메다 지고라서 되네 문바지 나라 아니 드메 바데나 디나나 잘라 가르면 상미 통다 디나시 시럽 세데 에탑 탑딜라 디메타 네 탑딜 토스 탑 신비기 그 심베 토네 니 시럽 중난이 미다고도 べ 시럽다 렌데 뭐 렌데 이 시베 시바다 니 직동반이다 다음에도 べ 시럽 때문에 만한지게 제디강기 강에서 내루티게디 시고 여러봐
Mhm.
그래서 시럽신이디 람비네가 시럽디 아 주 마진이지네 계정물에 주가질라다 디베장 계정물 차대도 와서봐
Mhm. So that was something about the method side of the path. As for the wisdom side of the path, to study Dharma, for example, we need wisdom. Even to do worldly things in career, we need that discriminating intelligence or wisdom. If we garden, we need to know the characteristics of the earth, which plants to plant, which plants are beneficial or harmful. If not, there can be harm in that manner. And we also need wisdom to know how humans interact with each other. We need wisdom to be able to remove suffering or not depends on wisdom, remove obstacles. Kind heart alone is not enough. One needs the kindness conjoined with wisdom. So, for example, one needs wisdom to understand the rarity of being perfectly human and all it entails, as well as the discrimination of death and impermanence, these types of things. In short, all of the things that, on a causal level, go to make the perfect mundane path of happiness a result of wisdom, let alone that, removing the root of cyclic existence, which is ignorance, depends on cultivating wisdom. And, moreover, our problems and difficulties in this life mostly come from self-cherishing and marikpa, or ignorance. These are removed by wisdom. Oftentimes, we meet someone, we have aversion to them, we could label them a foe or a harmer in this life. And it is the case because of your lack of knowing or lack of wisdom. You do not see that in a past life such a person was your dear relative, your teacher, your loved one, your child, your friend. So not only not have aversion to them, if you did have the wisdom, you would have affection for them. Lacking wisdom is like being in a dark place with a lack of light, in so much as that if you're in a dark room, you can't see the objects in it. But if you have a lamp, you have something that allows you to see those objects. So when we talk about the method being kind heart, you have to have the wisdom that goes with it. We can talk about the wisdom that understands impermanence. We can cultivate that. We can cultivate the wisdom that understands behavioral cause and effect, karma. We can talk about the wisdom that understands emptiness and the wisdom that understands non-self. So really, even in the context closer to us in this life, wisdom is the basis to remove a lot of our suffering. And, if you don't have a Dharma path, you need wisdom, but let alone talk about how much is it needed when we engage in Dharma. Yeah.
어디지 탑치 랑비네 가서 탑는 시럽니를 되는 주 데위드 가르에서는 안에 산지 있고 최주고는 소주고 있다 거대와 셰셰나 최주고서야 되는 산지 주의 셰바데 당당 알아서 셰바시도 와 먼저 심다나 가야 마신이시도 와
Mhm.
디파파파 다데데 배샤단도 될려야고요 먼저 추nyokpa chidwa
Mhm.
추nyokpa de nyokpa sedo de 당외 추 당마 차로도 담아들어와
mhm,
중요한 예배 내가라 아니 먼저 추나라 냐요바다 도요바다 자요바다 신요바다 이제 통금면도 알아와 아니 요바다 파 당으로도 아니 추 당마 차스나나 안 차상 통무도 와 디나시 안다 단단한 저 심베 다과 녀샤로 녀니데 가서는 차단으로 초지라쇼 직차 초지라 당제 아니베 참만유 버쇼지 차지 디그베데 두루 다샤로 근데게는 먼저 여기 야니 동니 내당 가래 디지 두고에 가래 동예서야 유진 가래 동예 근에 용어도 도좀 마신 버치제 아니베 디데요로 세상다 남야 곰제는 곰갸발라 소바다 직제네니 찬주 셈 고미하다 동문이 고미하다 진대 고미인데 추녀고도 봐 당에서 추 당마 차되네 동반이 있어야로 미다와서로 심지 탐제랑 마치용 것에 시 뜻시인데 아니 심지 탐제에서 녀나시 차로요 심나라 다스니다 심나라 미치질에 마가베 심딜리기어 말 심지 탐제 다게 전도 예세도 장주 주저 영원 제버지 세도 이원지 이원스는 스스 미지라 쉬우지 아마지 그 부지라야 제베 제와 딜라야 아니 콜라 레드스 개요마라 부부디 대화지 중로체나 동해지 마랑저로 쳤나 아직 동해단 덴바디 동해단 태와디 녜지기 대화다 덴바디 녜지기 삼백에 해미게 제심지 여러 메시지 부부디 그 파말라 쉬네 파마데 컨트롤 와
mhm.
자래 잡 롱데 쟤네 밤마도 컨트롤 사면도 와 어디나 신지 셔럽게 팬 원에 주 신용도 안도 마음바라 된대지다 내다지 레용도 된대게 셈다 셈제 탐제 다게 된대 니르세 된대 연구여 봐서다 이제 참마 네 셈디 야야야야야 야게도네 와 야게도네 네 다도나 된대데 대화토에 네 셔바들라 아니 추구고 세제 산제 유구 추구세데 단단한지 유기 셈데 야야야야 야게도네 차된 교지를 미주지기데
Mhm,
톱티가라 요아지 산제 중된 요르다 단단한 저기 셈지들베 데위지 칼레 잡선제데 데위지 에멘조데 말했어 하시던데
mhm.
데로단데 심베이나네 남바 산제 바사데 지 바림다 말한저 단다지 칼레 잡데버데 지 자고 추샤 섬산시로 어다 디샤네 나가데 너무 두 섬산시 그레스로
So then we talked about basis, path, and now result. The result is the two corpuses or bodies of a Buddha, the first of which is Dhammakaya, or the mind of a Buddha. Our mind, when it's purified completely, becomes that corpus or mind of a Buddha. The best analogy is that if a body of water is sullied or murky, you cannot see the objects in it. There could be, like fish, plants, stones. But once the water is clarified, you can see the objects in it. Similarly, our minds are shaken up with desirous attachment and aversion and are so sullied. We can't experience the lucidity of our own minds or the lucidity of objects due to that being shaken up. Not only that, we cannot experience ultimate well-being or dikki because our minds are shaken up with disturbing thought, obscurations. Not only that, we don't know how to get rid of those invalid states of mind. We are unaware of it. So therefore, we need to cultivate a path that allows us to get rid of those obscurations and emotions, to clear the murk away. And if we do that, and we understand the nature of our minds and reality through cultivating such a valid wisdom mind, when we come across other beings, we will no longer see them as being far, close, or be indifferent to them. Because as it says in the bodhicitta aspiration, may I invite all beings as my guest, looking on them with affection. This is this kind of exceptional resolve. much like even if a child is very naughty and misbehaves, the parents never give up and get angry around that child's behavior. This would be the Bodhisattva's attitude to beings. So wisdom is what allows us to invite all beings as our guest. It is also a mind that, when it is cultivated, this mind of a Buddha has permanent bliss. And our minds will eventually reach that stage, but it's not like it happens all of a sudden. You have to know the steps and you have to put in tireless effort. And it's good for us to know, or for us to get validation that we are in fact on a correct path. Yes.
산지 유영존제 요구들라 류들라 수구스로와
Yeah.
다 수구들라 먼저 여wasum 농구 두구스 대전이체 두구들라 안데 소고 두구 초구 두구 겨워 두구스 두구스um 여와치그로와 다들 계속 먼저 초구 두구 디기지 셰데로 수구 산지 유구라 수구 초구 수구스 진이샤로 아데도스레 수구디에게 년령 규디 가래라윈도 이네 이건도 선언사야스도 어디에 정말 수리는 있는 거라다지 지바다야 수준 소야서 보면 신비 전주심 기분을 나지 개와치야도 상맥이 야 데부디 가래도서는 산제 일루드 두명 거라 다디네 니 추구디 단다 동니도 저와 노베넬로 동니도 저 동니도 벨로디 묘망바 산제 유로 차르도 추구차 타조디 도다로데 딜레 구디 소고 구세야 되나다 말아서 배 찬신 파고 이제 연구도 소고들 롱구체와 되게 생각이 맞지 하던다 초우두구세야 되는 기생 다 참라고 되네요 초우두구세야 돼 네 기생이 참다 초우두구제와 중니나네 총고급에제와 세야 되는다 연구 기생 되네요 그래서봐
So we left off last week looking at these two bodies of a Buddha, the form body and the mind of a Buddha, if you will. The form body, which is divided into two, that Rupakaya, Sambhavakaya, and then Namanakaya. And then the mind of a Buddha, Chuku, which has the nature body and the wisdom truth body. The form body of a Buddha primarily is, in terms of its causes, are the merits from doing things such as being charitable, ethics and so forth, the merits which go to make up the form body of a Buddha. And the mind of a Buddha is primarily from cultivating the wisdom consciousness, realizing emptiness. Isla nielengi gu karisha. The tenda longku marida longku sebe. Yishigi choku.
Nishi chugula manzo janda yu sim seri cha. Tuni doni lotus shameliga.
Okay. So the substantial cause then of the wisdom truth body is that part of our mind that is clear, but adding on to that, when it realizes emptiness, that goes to make the wisdom truth body. And merit being the substantial cause of the aforementioned enjoyment body and emanation bodies. So we said that the enjoyment bodies could only be perceived by the Arya Bodhisattva beings, but with the other body, the tuku or emanation body, it can be perceived by ordinary beings. And then we began to talk about what is a supreme emanation body. And under that context, we looked at the 12 deeds of Shakyamuni.
아, 뉴저 나랑서 미 타메와 지도다 제 당부 삼보 삼보 신변 직군에네 파 당부 찬주주 두기 바르다 깔래 잡네로 봐 네베 김네
Mhm.
김에 브라도 총 로루카와체 세도조이나 베 롱제데 투로도조이나 투두감 여러다 건도 투두나라 유션조 투로든데 건 어딘데게다 깔래 까와체네 아니 타르 도지된 자가 도지된이야 아니 뭔가가 산제 산제니 니 편다 시베 체종을라 산제레 걔네서 편다 두베 체시서버 니마 니마 시우시구로 샤 시우시구 최송마송 바쇼데레
Mhm.
김전 가래에서는 최송세게 벨레 다 산제 사도도 렌데가 남샤 다시 타워도 챙겨와 그 최시에서데 대화요 시고 요라 최시에는 배 니도요와 공장도요와 전혀 니지고 요래 대안에 최송이 도마좀된 대화요 시고도 타산 예사도 렌데가 남샤 상마시기요다 다 쳤는데 라기요 말에 대화
Ndwa,
말하네
shirashagu. Maraya gimse. Le mamimba.
최년이기 간사라고요 말하다 배 대화요
Mhm.
얘기라고요 말하
Mhm.
타마들라 다 공화대 상부 대화 요대화 싫어 상마제 공래 가족이 대화 요 맞지 아니 저번에 저월에 대화 가시 요대화 다 대화 타 니슈르데 공화대 상부 이봐 어디 상로 단에 아니 두고 지실라 네 요월나 시스템다 자가 요로월나 실래야 아니 디시 총고 세야데 다 zam블링들라 추주 콜로 당보 추 당마 당보 또 맞은데 어디 송으로 알아
So we know that within those 12 deeds, there is the deed of, Shakyamuni Buddha generated the mind of enlightenment. But this was in the pretext of over a period of 3 countless great eons, having accumulated the merits to do so. But from the perspective of ordinary beings, generated that enlightened thought. And then, the other deeds were turning the wheel of Dharma, for example, the Four Noble Truths, and then passing into parinirvana. But for ordinary beings, what would have appeared would have been the going forth from being a householder and practicing austerities. And that's important because, like giving up the household life, taking roads and so forth, or, giving up just all those clothes and then doing 6 years of austerities. And then on the 15th of the 4th month, in that third watch of the night, attaining enlightenment in Bodh Gaya, but not teaching straight away for 49 days. There's a reason there. The reason was because upon awakening to full omniscience, of course, Buddha sees the subtleties of behavioral cause and effect or karma. But for that period, there's no disciples to subdue because, the time hadn't come. There was no one to hear, there was no one to meditate, because for a Buddha to teach sentient beings, there has to be beings to connect to. So there weren't those beings directly after enlightenment to do that too. But then we know latterly, after that 49 days in Varanasi, those that were closest to Buddha over many lives were those 5 disciples. So then in Varanasi, from the 3 turnings of the wheel, or the Buddha gave, the first was the teaching on the Four Noble Truths to those 5 close disciples.
그래서 다 도마준데 이 정보 니시 총고 송을 전문인들 봐. 그 걸로 팀어 당보데 최 당보데 송을 다 당분에 니 나라야 마산제 송 도마준데 주주 쉬우는데 봐. 지신 간번에 저거 다야로 오던데 수고 나가라 필요해로 오던데 와 세나는 주야 된데 주주 할래요다 주주 쉬우던데 내야로 와 산제 차도 이나 좀 내데 주주제 땜 민도와 주주 땜 주샤제 chirabji dujudu zoyi na ya ane juru toba nyesuna na juru tencho mares raja chesharwa gyumzen kare la di misama juru la ing parje juru jikdu ya miyu tiye chidiyo ne chwe chigres di juru toba ine koba le tadu mare dunga le tadu mares jesan di koba tarwe taba toba ya la gek chigres 나는 도마준에 진주께 신다 파샤네 근데 뭐시에다 찬주심다 람다 근데 그 똑같은데 깨되네 먼저 잡아두죠 밀래야 나 똑같은데 깨지 셰쳐고 한번 디시나 덴바시네 동아요 니바요 김진 가르스데 미드즈 다딘데 똑같이 토바요 서래 나한테 똑같이 토도 디시도 검자기라데 코 깔래자야디 전바지 이제 톱절라 믹제와 딜라 나랑도 딩선 로트를 감데 서저 로트디 상상하라 단 자야 뉴로 로트디
카와로 툭세다.
로트 가와차
어.
제가 먼저 로트하고
lottery.
로트리
Yeah.
겐쇼
Yeah.
이게 겐쇼세라
Yeah. Hopped a bit. Peldoria.
제가 겐쇼 또왜 소리 차제
Okay.
수수 즉 깔래자야기 내가도 마찬가지나 겐쇼게 가두라 그래요. 아니 가시 미가시 겐쇼를 장난쇼네. 내가쇼 배샤사야 말아가지 홈레스 챙겨던데도 겐쇼. 게 빈자지 별로 부부지 아자 부부지 겐쇼라 장난쇼네. 배가래 총디 수교가 다야로. 콜레가 배샤데스요디 남산 겐쇼로 또 겐쇼도 아니고 손자로 폴론소로 폴론테마도 얘가 바로 아뭐 갈래 쉬지도 하시나 티 덴버에도 좀 되게 니 덴버 준비 가도 덴버 인데 이와 지금 저 균제도 저 상단 니좀 되게 당보 거라야 니 이거는 동의시에 우리 송샤미 지금 주류 말 주류 톱성 마 또가 미니베년데 톱성 마 SM20에 톱성 예 띵인지 먹고 아니 베데 로네 로케와 케와 공자한테 톱성 근데 이제 숨는다 알아 제가 다가라네 먼저 랍자 갈래 뭐라나 아니 동의시
시아버차.
합란디 뭐 동의시에네 뭐 고주고 요바디 로단디 랍자 첨부인 바 하고 그래서
So a great piece of advice Shakyamuni Buddha gave us in terms of the Four Noble Truths. The first thing is when he said to know suffering, Lord Buddha didn't start out saying, no, I'm a Buddha, yes, I can do miracles, I'm enlightened, not like that, even though, of course, he was adept at these things. He could, for example, go into space and transform inert things like earth and wood into other things, but he did not show that at all. In fact, he couldn't show the students because if doing those sorts of things, it would be a distraction from them or getting to the state of liberation. The reason is that miracles are not the cause for liberation. Neither is showing that you are clairaudient or that you have high levels of bodhicitta. In fact, this is actually almost like a downfall if you show these things or exhibit these things, because in dependence on showing them, the monks or students could think, oh, he's got that, you know, and cling to that. And what would be forgotten is all the effort that goes into those levels and states of awareness. It would be like suddenly getting the lottery, thinking that with no effort you're going to get it. And there's a danger that you are habituated to getting the result without putting in the effort. In that lottery sense, you suddenly win something. And there are cases where beings use all their money to try and win lottery, but they end up being harmless. Poverty mentality. I have a relative in Tibet like that who really likes lotto. and spends all his wages on lotto, and even to the extent of going into debt almost. So it can create lots of difficulties. And Shakyamuni Buddha, it's true, isn't it? Shakyamuni Buddha saw these reasons to not show that he had these attainments in that regard. That's why in this first turning of the wheel in the Four Noble Truths, it is said, no suffering, know its characteristics. He didn't say, I can do miracles, I've attained nirvana, I can go from equipoise to equipoise. He did not say that at all. His first concern was no suffering with a view to cultivating peace.
제단단다 디 bombol로 나렌다네 기도당으로 캠보 가전단에서는 주류된으로 주류 가전은 짜도 세르스에서 봐. 그러나 주류된 매가 딩이지 또기 지단기 짜 주마인데 여러와. 짜도 세르스에서 봐. 아니 캠보기
peace.
나렌다네 비샤라. 기도당샤라.
So Nagarjuna was expelled, in fact, from Nalanda by the abbot because Nagarjuna had that siddhi of concentration where he could transform base metals into gold. So for doing that, the Nalanda abbot kicked him out.
별에 라마 주바인데 아니 야가 별에 추든데 삼바야 말아 아니 추가나 필요하던데 망고 총다 추가네 봐 필요해 봐 하나만 주변에 기도 당한테 봐 주도 된저 오면 라마 주바 네 기도 당하셔고 망고 총아
Peterson.
이셔 되네
Like Karsana Chong, Chu Chong.
시총 그 필치라 play on the water
Fly on the water, yeah, float, walk across. In a pigger, like Karsana comes to Tungu.
그 주도 되나
Yeah. So even in Tibet, Gyuto,
김에
Gyume, even in Tibet, in Gyume, some of the monks were expelled because they showed the city, but they didn't have bridges to cross the water, but they showed the city of crossing the water, and they're not supposed to show it.
어디래 제가 단단한 딘시디 좀 내대 중국어와디 기생 배우스는 난다 중이래 다 이나 단다디 말한저 곰잡디로와 곰자야는 뭐죠 디테스시나 편도에 보러 와
So in terms of the Four Noble Truths, last week we looked at these three phases and that relate to each of the Four Noble Truths, making 12 in total. So it's good to know how to meditate on them.
덴바시기 그림dig나데라 니요래 준데 튼지를 바다 냠링그를 바스르와 지글라다 준도 가래디 준데 튼지를 바데 가래 냠링그를 바데 가래서 콘저 티워스티 다네
So actually when we look at the Four Noble Truths, it can be approached in two ways. One is in terms of its cause and effect, and one is in terms of how it's practiced. Can anyone tell the difference or answer that question? The question is that we can look at the Four Noble Truths from one approach in terms of cause and effect, and from another approach in terms of how we practice the Four Noble Truths. What's the difference? Different order, yeah. What is the different order, Brisa?
Well, so definitely Buddha said, there's suffering, and then there's cause of suffering, but when we actually practice it, we have to unforget it. That's right, we have to look at the causes of suffering. And then also we need the path before we get to the help, isn't it?
Yes.
But in the order.
지워 세우 중세
Yeah, similar.
뭐 달라
And the next one is know your cessation and practice the path of cessation. So that's the practice order. But the cause and effect order is the causes of suffering are the causes and suffering is the result. And the cause of cessation is the result.
아, 네 당고대
Yeah, but you dig it.
당고대 따다데 데려야 돼
Yes, and the Geshe-la,
Agree? Disagree, agree?
you agree with Philippa? Did you? Yes.
You believe believer? Do you? Okay. Okay.
There's got to be a cause for cessation,
Yeah,
and then cessation is the result.
yeah, Gokdengi Gyu Yoris, Lamdendi Rwa. Then Gokdendi Dreboris, Lamdendi Gyu.
아니, the 당보디
And the first one in terms of the,
윤대 댕기린 바디.
Yeah, yeah,
demba 실레자. 군주 dem바다.
yeah, Geshe wants to know in terms of the, you know, this cause and effect, not the cause and effect, but what was taught first. So true origins and true sufferings, how does that work? Not in terms of practice, but how they're laid out. How Buddha taught.
Leads to suffering because people believe things exist.
To acknowledge this suffering before you get the cause.
Yeah. Tambo dukten ratu boreres. Vijala kunjung. Ratu.
예. 나디티 세우 시부치 오다라. 군대 던지는 바디 군중 당보체. 아니 도den이와 셔와. 아니 군중 규당 저거 도den 셔와. 아니 람덴 저장슬라고 다르 람덴 규체. 고된 제외 대위스 대부분이 대부다 군대 따고이라 라디와. 고고된 따고래 되라. 일에 군대 민다와 군대 난신게 지 남샤지 요인자. Okay,
so first let's look at, you know, the cause and effect level of it. So true origins is the cause of the first set of two, and true suffering is the result. And as you mentioned, the latter two, the cultivating a true path is the cause, and the result is true cessation. But really, because we do call it cause and effect, but because it's not like a functioning thing, we really call it the result of absence, because it's permanent. Yeah.
먼저 레다 군중라 레유 군중 녀모 군중 니샹고와 레라 디 녀모 군네나 레사 레디게 도세 파마 나라 남시디자 안데네 겨원에 안데네 간도 루덴데 도르와디 다디 균데로다 다란 레도라.
Yeah, so if we look at true origins, there's the true origin of karma and true origins of disturbing emotions. And in dependence on the true origin of disturbing thought obscurations, karma is created. So in dependence on that, the mental consciousness enters the womb of the mother, that ignorance. 12 links. The mental consciousness enters the womb of the mother in that sense, from karma.
이제 언제네 당연 먼저 셰브나시 셰럽 개심보래 럽디 니 셰럽디 야 야르게로네로 럽종 당보 먼저 럽종 셰와 투중의 셰럽지로
No.
투중의 셰럽지는 삼중 셰럽 맨나 동반이라 미베 투중의 셰럽 되네 삼중 셰럽 되네 kum중 셰럽도 언제네 동반이 되무슨도 도르데 아니 남된 차고 와 제도 벌었더니 이 녀모 사면다지 방법이 토빈 거로 왔다디.
Yeah, so the way cause and effect would work with the wisdom side of the path, true path and then true cessation, is that first you have to study about reality. So there's this threefold process. You have to hear about emptiness first, or the lack of intrinsic nature. Then you have to reflect on what it means and finally meditate on it. In terms of that third stage of meditating, finally, when you get direct insight through meditation into that lack of intrinsic nature, you cultivate a true path. And in dependence on cultivating that valid true path consciousness, afflictions and their roots are eliminated. Yes, in true cessation. Yeah, but really the way the Four Noble Truths were taught is really from the way we would put them into practice.
내내 시제 내기 균에 반장라스 너와 디네도 자면에 된발이 와서 동해 주단한테 고고다 디지 시제 반장 리버치 템바 찬스라도 내내 시제스 아마만도 아니 멤버십 된제 수수 내바지나 멤버디 미디 나자디 가리메 시바시그라와 내디 시바치 아니 내디 시엔디 내디 베나도다 지 고나다로지나 근데 규가르도와 그런데 대단하다 주도야 융타래 같이를 다시 팔래 그 규제도 와요 내 규제 규디 아니 규디 전 내디 레 트웨 타와유메 다그로 좀에 다디 미디 나자 트 차바든데 여르에 나자 타웨 미딘데 여르에 나자 상다도 미딘데 여르에 요단디 여르스 디 공된지 디네 아니 다메인 가르다는 나자도 차도 서봐 네 람딘 진짜 두스제 레기도 제가 당봉하서 아주 류디 사제니는 풍부디 동해그란 시디 쉐버체라 다 동해그란 시디 쉐버체네 디야야야야야야 대주도 규jen데 대주도 싸워디 레다 뉴몬데 톡되어 봐 제가 말한지 단다지 류를 내나서 망고 용야지 세단 줄람지고 말해 봐 세단 줄람지에 진은 누구요래 레레다 축축치슈지 남배나네 레레 되어인 거래 봐 레레 되어요디 먼저 리고다는 하고 그래 내가 먼저 강바든 되지나라 두스 데데데 미카시 강바되나라 나용 그러다 보수도 오고 차야다 가시 배 되나라 기부 쉬도 쓰다 유진 지구에 있는 미상을 나는 나냥 기부에 있는 영향이 오고 진짜 네 미카시를 되나라 기부제 대학 레디 요마다 메티에 날 보수도 오제 되나 되니마다 데 구멍부터 로망부터 야우면도 감는 되니데 여러 가지 두즈리데 되나 대학 레디 메고 띵고로 이게 지버지 상대로 미카시 되나를 빼 기부도 서봐 내가 믹스해지도 되니데 그 되나 레 요어도 되는 거라 진짜 네 렌데 남샤데 가능 감정이 간저 하고 그래 레디야다 군노라 군노론지기 녀모라 되네 총으로 차바단 당원되네 총아 차바당원데 디물라 되네 총아세 착세야데 나 디지질 가기도 서봐 마리기도 안간질리기도 직달리기도 데데 엔데나 중이나 통매 마리바데 가다 단지로 와셔다 나 딜가기도스 나 딜가기민도스 다라는 가다 마게 무엔데라 말리기도 알아 저는 그 공전어 되자다 하고 남사 아니 네 갈체래 나 지지지 미신다데 말라 지지지 나 딜가기민도 나 딩에 당보대 주야 인버다 당다 제가 되게 지게 어디다 먼저 녀외톤에 상담도 하고 그랬더라
In that context of the way you set about to practice the Four Noble Truths in sequence, there is that quote from Gyulama Maitreya Buddha: just as a sickness needs to be known, its cause identified, the medicine taken and a cause, the cessation of that sickness to be effected. Similarly, it is with knowing true sufferings, removing the cause, cultivating the path, and then healing from that unawareness or ignorance. It's just as we would rely on a doctor's diagnosis of the sickness, we'd have to know, okay, so what is the cause of the disease? We'd have to diagnose the cause. Then we would want to know, thirdly, okay, so can it be healed? Is there a person, so for example, if someone has had a particular headache or ailment, is there someone that's healed from it? Has a cause been affected for them? And then if that is the case, then how about taking that medicine as in that sense? So then first we recognize that we're sick. We would first recognize true sufferings, meaning that the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are in the nature of suffering. and that behind those are karma and disturbing emotions. And this is very important, this kind of karma and disturbing emotions, because a lot of times we think we get sick out of wrong diet or something else. But if you really trace it back, it's much more deeper than that. It's really karma. For example, if we look at this building, just this Gompo, some people will come here and they'll love it. They'll thrive. They'll love being amongst the holy objects. And then other peoples will come in and they'll go, oh, I can't stand it in here. You know, it upsets me. I can't stand all the statues and images. But it's interesting because the condition is exactly the same. The building is the same. For some, it's an object of like. For some, it's an object of not like. So that is karma, because the condition they're coming into is exactly the same. So we need to understand how karma functions on that level. But then, of course, knowing that, you know, in karma, there's also true origins. So, you know, these, particularly in terms of afflictions, liking something or not, or having desirous attachment or not. And this is a very important point. There is this very strong notion of, oh, I like it. And this can only come about due to self-grasping as we look at the 12 links of dependent origination, the first of which, you know, when we look at that, unawareness or self-grasping, oftentimes there's a person who's discriminating, oh, I like this, but I don't like that. But prior to that, there has to be this notion of I that's doing that discrimination. And this is a very important point for us to meditate on. You know, you don't like the object for you, or you like the object for you. So then the point there is that discrimination, or that I that's perceiving the object, has to be changed. And that we can know through experience. Yeah.
그래서 단다 디 딘시기 동해시와지 군주방와지 보고는 랑곰바 쳤어야 돼. 냠랭이를 말했어. 그래서 딜을 하고 왔다. 냠랭이 고주서 되는 거래 성도와. 그래서 네 먼저 되게 전문이 자시와.
Yeah.
지금 잠복 공부들 원도지 값이 왜 나는 것도 도와 그전에. 값이 왜 나라야. 네. 전문이 자시디 템바실을 자도와. 딘닝저 시도. 네 그래서 망보지게 값이 버드네. 자주 선배 윤대식이요. 먼저 저면도 전이 망보여래. 티레 레면도 매 단다 값이 왜 나라네. 자주 선배지 전문이 자시에는데 전문이 자시 시고의 금전 시에는데 대실을 자도와. 그래서 류 전문이 자서로 한 거. 먼저 류를 미제다. 류랑 뭐를 따오라 전문이 자들와. 류랑이 뭐를 따용데 아니 동해시가 차서 먼저 류디 류게 란시디 도스타인데 동해로 게냐냐래 게 단다 단다 말아도 단다 디젤라 단다 동해 요마래와
No.
아니 게 틱스 태우다라 베나가로이나 네 하고 잡제 폰일레스나 남자가 해피발레사 합지 잡사 단다 셈바데 기오이저디 수수 수고라 데네 툭드니즈나 툭사래와 제가 이제 아니 류딜라 주진 칼라사다지 노드나 나루도르와 치통의 융타나 나루도르와 아니 베디 욱다의 융타나 나루도르와 그제 주지지게 람사 나도 써요 것도 제가 류그란신라 따야데 류디 즉 자상하지레 민도스 간다 동해그란신 얘기를 샤스데 동해 시에와 자세 셔야데 동해 됨바데 류디레와 타는 뭐 샤마르 수수 류다라 동해 됨바레 그다음 디 아니 류트만 예샤고는 류란이 뭐라 따와서 랑게 신이 따와도 지신이 따와서죠 템반 녀와 샤스데 템바데 디가는 샤고라 녀와 샤스데 류지가는 마 샤제 근데라 상무 땅제로 디는 시 칸데레도 란시디 칸데레도 따위나 아니 동해 시바 차서 좀 되게 있음바데 어디래 디 시바 차서 뭐야 다시
So that's why Shakyamuni Buddha, when he first turned that wheel of the Four Noble Truths, said no suffering, remove the source of suffering, actualize cessation by cultivating a true path. And when we studied Maitreya's ornament, there was that teaching in the 4th chapter on the 4 close placements of mindfulnesses. And this is really a wonderful teaching because it relates really beautifully to the Four Noble Truths. Because in the context of when Buddha said no suffering, then the close placement of mindfulness on the body is exactly that. One is looking at the entity or nature of the body, and one comes to see that it isn't the nature of true suffering or dissatisfaction. What is the condition of the body? It is such that if it meets just a tiny condition, it can be upset. So for example, with me, if the wind blows and there's pollen about, I get hay fever. So I was going along happy, but then suddenly the body gets upset with that sickness, isn't it? Or if we eat something a bit slightly wrong, we get sick. If we ingest water that's dirty, similarly. So it's just tiny conditions upon which the body gets sick. Then we can come to see the body's nature is that, in the nature of dissatisfaction and suffering. So therefore no suffering, and recognize that the body is the exemplification of that. The nature of the body is true suffering, and this is what Shakyamuni Buddha was referring to. It's not something you have to look for very far out there, just observing your own body, because there's like general and specific characteristics of true sufferings, isn't there? So we take the body as like a specific one to us experientially. Yes.
대단하다 류지랑 신라 다연데 아니 동해 제용도 알아
Yes.
동해 제야다 마지워야데 가를 되네션데 초와데도 시키기도 알아
Yes.
초와 동해 시키도 내가 지우면도 나가다 간다 그래
Yeah.
초와 동해 시키도 나 지우면도 초와 대와 시키도 나 지우도 초와데도 니는 또 되고
Yes.
아니 초와데 데 텐데게 초와니디 간에 용거를 초와데도 간에 지워서는 차단네 용거로 안디 요모로다 그다음 초와 때문에 샤라 때문에 군중 방어 차사의 신고한다 봐 초와 때문에 샤
Yes.
류게 디루라 상단 초와 시기도 초와들다 연데 초와제야 돼 차단을 되는 게임도 차단이 요모로 그다음 초와들도 디방고요나 차단의 방고도 되네 군중 방어 차사의 데레더라
Yes. So we understand then that the body's nature is dissatisfaction and like a magnet for suffering. It can get upset. But then we can also look at that further in terms of the sensations or feelings we have around that. If our feelings and sensations are good and we're not experiencing pain or discomfort, we say, I'm happy. But if the feelings we're experiencing are displeasurable, then we say, I'm not happy, I'm suffering. So really those feelings come from afflictions, desire, thought obscurations of desirous attachment and aversion. And this is what we can really point to as true origins, the second mindfulness of feelings, because we're wanting to remove the source of suffering. So first you have a body that experiences pleasure or pain, and you have feelings related to those sensations, which come from desirous attachment and aversion, which are afflicted. So then we relate those feelings to true origins.
다 되네 아니 간도 류 때문에 샤 초와 때문에 샤
No.
네 심 때문에 샤와
No.
심 때문에 샤데 차단다 당기게 초와 때문에 샤게 차단이 되네 초와데도 중샤스 아니 차단데 방구도 차단데 방배 방바디 레온데 네 심라 직 대화직 용요로 심tem만이샤 싱무딘 차단세베 세와데 싱무딘 파세로 뭐라 근데 이제 심tem만이샤 심tem만이샤를 시행도 고공문의 체제 나르게 차단이 바 예외 소리 차단이 거와 예고래서도 심 세리 차라와 예로 소리와 된대로지 당도라고 상도 된대 연구열어 근데 내가 고공문의 체제와 유모세베 세바 먼저 차단이 세야도
Kokmonyundi chansirbe.
숨바들와 고공원도 쳐야 되라 아니 심tem만이 샬레용도 심tem만이 샬레네 고공원도 치단데 제가 마게 차단세베 세바지 이 가르데네 세로와는 싱딩도 파 예루고 도스르와 안디인주디 고공원도 쳐야 되데 두스 자도 나라와
Ladilla. That this third close placement of mindfulness then close placement of mindfulness of mind, we come to see that, we're trying to get rid of disturbing thought obscurations, primarily desirous attachment and aversion. And when we work with mind, they abate in mind itself. And once those feelings of desirous attachment and aversion pass, then the bliss of mind manifests. In short, the afflictions abate in mind or dissolve there. Why? Because once you have the cessation of these desires, of these thought obscurations which are invalid, they dissolve into, and what manifests is the salrikicha, the part of the mind that's clear and luminous. So then you have a type of cessation, isn't it? Yes.
제가 차단이 세워져야돼 네 가르드네 뭐 디묵세고도 스와 디묵세어 집에 탐란데 가르란데 네 동만이도 하고 스와 동이도 로들 때네 아니 뒤에 가서래 차단세고도 유문세고도 제가 뒤다 동이데 동이를 미운데 최르만이 샤샤서 최르만이 샤라 미운데 돈이도 velade lo musum도 velade lamde야 lam모도 쳤어 두체네 다 대시기 냠nen도 단데 전문의 샤가나 자네 되게 상당도나 대단하마 좀내디 송야데 람냠len 그레베가나 순서와 그래서 딘데기 람시 남샤데 셰비나 아무도 로준시야데 냠nen시야라 다 쉬어지기 내가 전부래도 알아 그 냠nen시다를 뭐 순샤와데 로준시니 셴고도 다들 수수 처음으로 잘해요 전문의 샤데 처음으로 가는 자요래 덴바시데 처음으로 가는 자요래 다 목된다 남데 진이 상와다 요마데 제tum 버지 다버지 단네 요를 하고라
So really one is getting rid of desirous attachment and aversion, but also ignorance, isn't it really? What's being removed is the unawareness. Those invalid thoughts or reflections are being removed, which is unawareness, ignorance. And if you cultivate that, then you begin to cultivate the fourth close placement of mindfulness, which is mindfulness of phenomena, by cultivating an understanding of the nature of things. And then you begin to actualize a path, a true path. So we can see how this fourth one, coming into four close placements of mindfulness of phenomena relates to the Four Noble Truths as well. Because one needs to actually practice the path in terms of meditation and equipoise. But to do that, you need to thoroughly study, okay, so what are the steps and how do I practice them in terms of how do I experience the paths in this life? So you need to have an overview of the Four Noble Truths and the four close placements of mindfulness to do that. Yes.
Oh yeah, that
Should we stop for today?
Sure.
Phil?
The question relating to last week.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the Four Noble Truths, and you said that, the five disciples, they understood the lack of inherent nature, but you also said there was no teaching of emptiness. So,
No teaching of emptiness.
no.
Hmm.
In the Four Noble Truths.
Yes.
Okay, the question was that that the close disciples understood. They all attained the path that was said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They said that they all.
Attained the path of seeing. Remember?
they realized-
Last one.
Yeah. These, yeah. You know,
What's that now?
oh, okay. Do I have to say that for the machine? Sorry. Okay, everyone listening. The question was, it was taught that although Buddha didn't explicitly teach emptiness, the five close disciples got the path of seeing. Is that your question?
No. As far as I understand, Four Noble Truths was related to the law of causality, to, not to emptiness. Is that correct?
So is,
Wasn't the second will or third will about emptiness?
okay.
I don't understand how they knew about the lack of inherent nature.
Okay, so the question is, doesn't the Four Noble Truths really relate to the law of causality, not explicitly emptiness? Wasn't emptiness explicitly taught in the second turning? Is that your question?
Yes.
Kisla tambo di denchi kordang dira,
Mm.
tambo ko na di kordeng nga di dembashi kone, ta tongni tambo sangi chamnen de tongni se di ngosum rat chö ma che ba che sung min dwa.
네.
Ine yang
그런 더.
kode yeah.
음.
Ine yang kode nga di
음.
anglan tora ba.
네.
Sung sang di kandi na.
제가 데려와. 대시기 충고나라 무엇을 동반이 송요 말해. 그러와. 이는 대나라 간사담에 송요 봐. 저는 간사담에 무슨 동인데 달람 터도고요. 그래. 다디 룹다스스 데스 켜와샤고라. 다디 단다 룹다 여와드시나.
Ine
거의 거야 내가요. 그래. 근데 디시디 대과 두모 년도에 되는 체인데 동반이 뭐 송요 말했어. 봐. 저 다음에 동반이 송요 말해. 간사담에 송 간사담에 무슨 돈인데 달람 터도고레스. 어디시고레스.
No. Okay, so when Buddha did the first turning of the wheel and taught Four Noble Truths, emptiness was not explicitly taught. What was taught was the non-self of persons. And in dependence on that, those disciples attained the path of seeing. So, for example, in terms of the Four Noble Truths, for the hearers, they are not taught emptiness, but in other words, they're not taught the emptiness of phenomena, but they are taught about the lack of the emptiness of self of person. And that's what the first turning was towards.
Of course, would Geshe be able to, because I found that really interesting last week, unfortunately I wasn't here, but you know, that would he be able to teach the second turn in the wheel, how it affected the disciples?
The second turning of the wheel, at Rajgir,
Or,
yep,
or whenever the emptiness comes in.
right. The question was, you weren't here last week, but you're interested to know if Geshe could teach about the second turning of the wheel. Is it?
Yeah, and the effect it had on those.
And the effect on the disciples. Because the Geshe, the Zinta, Dundanyuma kon leyum da, in yang kon turning yusa. That kolonipa di Rajgir nangla, di kola jeshites chana, kanasana diletene, ketu konzo shibishin yom yom leyong kurba. Nicola ing dusako. Yeah. In the coming weeks, we can go through.
Okay.
What if you
get our, like, either exam or presentation questions very soon?
Yeah, I'll-
Yeah, soon.
Yeah, I'll send them tomorrow for you. Yeah, we have made them, but I haven't typed them yet.
When does the course end?
Zintatama di Karriere.
I think they need to make more clear people give.
When the last classes maybe.
Yeah, in
It's still
Monday,
3 weeks.
Wednesday, Sunday, last class, maybe better to tell people the message. Understand, making holiday plan.
Mind already distracted, right?
Yeah, I think.
Distracted.
Yeah, stop here.
Namda Shingla Chapa.
Changes in your budget,
Those crowds are there for the full. But if you think we're gonna be happy in terms of the world, but they probably find things in that sort of speech. My order on which is spontaneously. So if you're concerned that you the transplant going to be. We understand the powerful invitation of emptiness and compassion. To the lotus holder takes the best life to finish. My order only wishes to be spontaneously fulfilled. You are always there is on the way. The therapist about what we are on board. The statement that I cannot break my mouth to victorious doctrine. The mouth they accomplish magnificent prayers honoring spiritual. Savior of myself without this your disciple. Please, don't time. For a man and the chilling relation of myself and others with 3 times. May the teaching of God above any of God like
Okay, good night. Oh, yeah, this. In the member to the
striving simultaneously for the sake of the victorious one's teaching. The self gave way through joy, benefit, and happiness of marriage. And for the mother of thee, who so highly divided the peace of what a great love. Nevertheless, we have to see the truth of the blessings of the ocean of the 3 children. And the great waves of what you should have children, the victorious one. And the smile of the reincarnation of swiftly being in the world of fortune.